Welcome. Parashat Hashavua, Parashat Balak, comes and teaches us that Am Yisrael was sinning in the end of the parasha with Nob Moab. The reason for that, says the Torah Kedosha, is because they were nichshal by getting close to them. How is it that they came so close to them? How did it happen? Says the Gemara in Sanhedrin Kufav that the women are waiting for Am outside the tents, and they told them they have all kind of merchandise to sell them. When Am Yisrael saw the merchandise, they told them they have better merchandise for them inside the tent. When they came inside the tent, they offered them wine. And once they offered them wine, Am Yisrael, the men, were drinking the wine, and it says over there that the wine started burning within them. And from here, the road to the scene was very close. The Gemara mentions over there, "Ve'adain lo nigzar al hayayin," which means Chachamim did not yet forbid drinking wine of goyim, and therefore it was very easy for them to be nichshal from the drinking the wine in doing the actual sin with Benot Moab. And therefore, we learn from that a wine is something that brings a person to sin, as the Gemara many times mentioned. Therefore, Chachamim were gozer not to drink stam yeinam. It's so strict that the Ben Ish Chai writes that there's a sefer called Yen HaMeshumar. That's that sefer that speaks about stam yeinam, tells you things that are horrible that will happen to a person that drinks stam yeinam, and it's so harsh. The sefer is so it's scary that the Ben Ish Chai says that if you read it, your hair will stand up. Tisamarna se'arot rosho. And therefore, one needs to know that drinking wine of goyim is something very strict. The Mefarshim explain that this is the reason we do Havdalah on wine. Says the Meshech Chochmah that the reason for that is because wine demonstrates the separation between Am Yisrael and the Goyim, and therefore you do on wine. Havdalah, the separation between Shabbat and Yom Chol, is to demonstrate the same separation we have between us and the Goyim, Israel ve'Amim. And that is something from that Chachamim made that gezerah in order to separate ourselves from the Goyim. But when the gezerah wasn't done yet in our Parashat Balak, so it was very easy for them to, from drinking, to go and sin afterwards. And therefore, Haman HaRasha said to Achashverosh, you'll see that as soon as you touch that wine, no Jew will drink that wine anymore. And even if a fly falls into the wine, they don't mind. They'll take the fly, they take it out and drink the wine. That's fine. But if you, Achashverosh, will touch the wine, they will not drink it. That's to show how strict it is, that idea of separation. That's why when we hold the cup of wine on Leila Seder, on Pesach, we says, Vehi shamda la'avotenu velanu. The Mefarshim explain, what does it mean, Vehi shamda? Some say that it goes on the wine that we hold in our hand to show and demonstrate that this is what made the separation between Am Yisrael and the Goyim. Vehi shamda lanu vela'avotenu. Because of that, we still today not mingled within the Goyim, not married to Goyim, and therefore we still considered Am Yisrael. We still are a united nation that belongs only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The truth is that when we're dealing with Yain Nesech, there's a Isur Deoraita involved in this as well, when the wine was nusach, which means it was poured to Avodah Zarah. That's when the Torah says that Yishtu yen nesicham. What does it mean? The Torah says you're not allowed to drink the wine that was poured to Avodah Zarah. But if it wasn't poured to Avodah Zarah, it doesn't have to be poured. It could be mitnasech la'Avodah Zarah in other ways. For instance, if a goy takes it and shakes it in order to honor his Avodah Zarah, so that would be something that's also considered already something that's asur, mideoraita. And then Chachamim came and restricted as well, together with that also, Stam Yeinam. Stam Yeinam means, even if he didn't shake it, just he owns it, he touched it in such a way, or he did something with it that demonstrate that maybe it's something that could be asur, you're not allowed to drink it. Therefore, you're not allowed to buy a bottle of wine from the goyim because of that very reason. It belonged to the goy. You're not allowed to leave the bottle of wine when it's yain she'eno mevushal together with the goy alone, because we're afraid that he might do such a thing. But that gzera, as it's explained in the Shulchan Aruch, is not only asur to drink the wine, but it's also asur be'ana'ah. You're not allowed to benefit from that wine. Says the Shulchan Aruch in the beginning of Ilchot Nesech, Stam yeinam shel omamim ovdei kochovim asur be'ana'ah. You're not allowed to benefit from that wine. Why is that? Says the Taz, it was a double gezerah. First gezerah was mishum bnotehem asru b'shtiya, which means Chachamim restricted drinking stam yenam, wine that belongs to a goy, even though we don't know that he poured it to avodah zarah. We don't know that it was nitnasech la'avodah zarah. But as long as it belongs to the goy, we're not allowed to drink it. Why? Mishum bnotehem. So in order that we're not going to come close to their daughters, which means when you come close to a goy, he invites you to the house. Could be a neighbor, could be somebody you work with, could be your boss, could be somebody you got to know. You come to his house, and the normal thing that people do, they drink together a little bit wine, and this is how they get close to each other. And therefore, what will happen next is that his daughter will come up, and you'll see the daughter, and you're a little bit high, and that will be very close to come and sin with the daughter, want to marry her daughter. You get to know them. So Chachamim restricted that altogether. They said drinking yain of a goy would be completely forbidden. But that's only mishum bnotehem. It was restricted only in drinking. Then later on, Chachamim also made the gezerah not to benefit from it whatsoever, and that is asur be'ana'ah mishum gzerat yain nesech. The gzerah of ana'ah was a gzerah of this, that we might be afraid that he poured it to avodah zarah. Therefore, Chachamim restricted any wine, even be'ana'ah. Maybe that wine was poured for avodah zarah. Now this is the base of the halacha, that it's asur to drink wine and it's asur to benefit from it as well. Even today, according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's asur be'ana'ah. According to Ashkenazim, there are sometimes leniencies, but Sfaradim are much more strict in yain nesach, that it's asur be'ana'ah. We're talking about goy that's oved avodah zarah, like the Notzrim. We're talking about the Ishmaelim. It's a step easier. There could be that it's only asur b'shtiyah and not asur be'ana'ah. There's reasons to say that sometimes wine would not be completely asur. There's laws of when one is allowed to drink wine and one is not allowed to drink wine, but we're not going into all the details today. That's not the topic. What we wanted to do today is deal with the question of sherry cask whiskey. Sherry cask whiskey is something that's lately was put into the headline as something that could be problematic, but potential yain nesach in it, and we need to understand why is it and what's the poskim opinions of that sherry cask whiskey. Now we need to understand that whiskey normally originated in Scotland, and that's where they make the original and good whiskey. Now that whiskey is not made only just like from the alcohol, but rather also they mature it in oak barrels, which give it a good flavor. Now, how does it give it a good flavor? So we need to understand the process. The process of whiskey is actually, according to law in Scotland and in America and other places in the world, has to be with exact definition of what you're allowed to use, what kind of ingredients and how you do it, and how long you have to mature it. The minimum of maturing it in Scotland would be 3 years. Usually it goes way longer than that, but that's a minimum. You can't sell a whiskey if you matured it less than 3 years. Now, what they use to make the whiskey is, first of all, they take either wheat or barley or corn, something like that, as the main ingredients, and then they take malted barley, They take also yeast in order to ferment the alcohol and the whiskey. And then they use also some coloring, that's the caramel coloring, in order to give it that color that it has. Now, in the way you do such a thing, explained very nicely in the Kuntrist that Rav Asher Padua wrote, and he explains that the way they do the whiskey is that they take the barley, let's say, or the wheat, and they grind it into some kind of thick flour. They take that and they add to that also malted barley, and that also helps that it changes the starch. It changes it into a starch, and that's the very beginning of the process. You put it and you let it ferment. After it ferments, in the end of the fermentation, you'll have like some kind of beer look like alcohol, which has about 6 to 8% of alcohol, and then you'll take it and you'll need to refine it. You'll take it to the refining machine, and you refine it again and again until you have clean alcohol, almost 95% of alcohol in the liquid, which would not show you any difference between this alcohol and any other alcohol that you have. You took alcohol there was in that liquid that you refined. Afterwards, instead of taking that, for instance, when you make vodka, you'll take that and you just bottle it and sell it as vodka. But over here, when we're dealing with whiskey, it comes the main process that you'll do for that whiskey. And that is, you'll take those barrels and you put them into that barrels for a long time. As we said, minimum 3 years, they'll mature it in that barrel, they'll let it sit in there. What's in that barrel? Why is it so important to use that barrel? So we need to understand that that's not something that's so clear to the professionals as well in the whiskey industry. They don't know if what helps in the barrel is the wood taste that before, let's just explain this. Before you put the whiskey in the barrel, they'll take wine and they'll put the wine inside that barrel. And what's the reason they put the wine in that barrel? That's something that's not so clear to the professionals. Why is it? Because some say that the reason you put wine in the barrel is because the barrel itself, since it's made out of oak, it has like a burning, sharp taste into it. And once you take out, you'll put in it the whiskey and you leave it in there for a long time, so it will give that flavor that would ruin the whiskey. That's not going to have that fine taste. And therefore, in order to kill that sharpness from the barrel, from the oak, they first put wine in there. It's soaked in wine. Once it's soaked in wine, it doesn't have that sharpness in it anymore that would ruin the whiskey. That is one opinion. The other opinion is the reason they put wine first in those barrels is because after you leave it for a while, it gets soaked in the barrel. It becomes something that's part of the barrel. The wine is all inside the thick layer of that barrel. And therefore, afterwards, when you want to put the whiskey inside, that wine will give it a good flavor that the whiskey has. That's different of opinions. What's the reason of using wine to soak and to live inside that barrel and then using that same barrel for whiskey? Either because the wine, again, completely kills all the sharpness inside the oak, or because it gets inside the oak, inside the barrel, and lately afterwards, when you put the whiskey, it would come out of there and give that flavor to the whiskey. Some hold like this, and some hold like that. Regardless, when we come to our she'ela over here, can you use it? We're dealing today with that barrel that's called sherry cask barrel. Why is it called sherry? Sherry is not cherry. It's not the fruit that we eat. Rather, it's that wine that gets soaked inside that oak barrel, inside that oak tree. And therefore, we need to know if it gives flavor, that wine would be definitely yain and nesech, and it goes into the whiskey. You're not allowed to drink that whiskey altogether. So what's the halacha over here? That's something that we need to know. So the first one that spoke about it was the Minchat Yitzchak in Chelek Bet, Siman Kafret. He brings over there few reasons to permit drinking that whiskey. And also Belsky himself, when he writes in Shulchan HaLevi, he writes about this Minchat Yitzchak, and he says that using such whiskey would be permitted for the reasoning that Minchat Yitzchak wrote. He wrote over there a few reasons to permit that whiskey. First of all, he says that we don't know what's the reason that this wine is being soaked in the barrel, as we said right now. And most likely it is in order to actually kill the sharpness within the barrel, within the oak. And therefore, such a thing is not something that's asur. And secondly, even if it wasn't put for that, even if it is put for flavor, but if you can't feel the flavor afterwards when you drink the whiskey, you don't feel in any way wine flavor, such a thing would be permitted. That's another reason to permit it. And the reason is because that little wine that comes out, it completely batel inside the liquid, and you don't feel it anymore. Thirdly, even if you say that it does shape up the whiskey, it does give it something that makes it what it is, but it's not the only thing that the barrel helps in order to make the whiskey whatever it is. Rather, there's other things in it that make it the whiskey that we drink, and that is the oak itself. Because if it wouldn't be for the oak itself, for the wood itself, they would just add a little bit wine whenever the whiskey process is finished, the fermentation. They would add a little bit wine and sell it like that. But rather, when you leave it in that barrel, that's a very, very important thing that is done, because they put barrels like this, they take it apart, and then they put one wood near the other, and they connect them together. It's a thick barrel oak. It's something that really breathes in and out. It's like the whiskey inside it, it's not just it's closed, but rather it's breathing. But the oak also has that ma'ala, that although it's breathing, but it doesn't spill any of the whiskey outside. And therefore, that itself is something that adds to the whiskey and gives it to the good flavor that it has. Also, the air that comes in and out, the breathing, all these things are very important. And therefore, although even if there would be over here something else that helps because of the wine, not only that, but other things as well, that would be considered ze veze gorem, which means if you have such wine that helps make the whiskey whatever it is, we're not talking about the flavor right now, but it helps shapes it to whatever it is. But that's not the only thing. There's also the wood and the air, and therefore, because of all that, it would be permitted. Fourth, you can say that barrel already became so old because we don't know that this is a fresh barrel. Such a thing would also not be something that's asur. And finally, even if they did use it, they did use the barrel with wine initially, and they did soak that barrel with wine, but could be that this whiskey that comes to our table already is not the first one that was matured in that barrel. Rather, could be it's the second, third, fourth, fifth. And once you put 3 times a liquid inside a keli, that completely cleans out the keli according to halacha. This is how you clean and machshir. This is how you kosher any kind of kli, any kind of utensil, especially we're talking about those barrels. You put in it 3 times liquid. Since you put 3 times liquid in it, it would not be anymore davar asur. It becomes a kosher barrel. So could be over here they put whiskey in it already for 3 times, and therefore those barrels would be kosher and you could use it. For all these reasons, says the Minchat Yitzchak, that we permitted to use that whiskey and drink it. Now, Rav Padua, when he writes about this, he says that today is not anymore the same facts as the Minchat Yitzchak wrote many, many years ago. Rather, today, many things in the industry became much better in order to permit that whiskey. Like, for instance, today, the whiskey is not only made in Scotland, it's made in other places in the world as well, and also in the USA. When you make it in the USA, the law over here is very different than the law in Scotland. In Scotland, you have to use such barrels as we explained before. But in America, you must use first fill, which means you can't mature the whiskey in a barrel that had wine. Rather, you have to put it for the first time in that barrel. So how do you take up the sharpness from the barrel? They made a new system. They take that barrel and they burn it inside. Once you burn it inside, that takes away that sharpness, and then you can put the whiskey inside it and you mature it like this, and that is fine. But afterwards, what do you do with those barrels? Became old. You can't use it a second time. So they ship it to Scotland, and over there, the law is that you can't use a first fill. You have to use something that was already used before. That's the reason it's so different, the flavor there, than the flavor in America. And therefore, they take that barrel that the Americans can't use anymore, and they use it over there. It comes out to be a beautiful combination between the two things that the American use, and they don't need anymore, and they give it over to the Europeans. Now, when we're dealing with that, that makes the halacha much better, because now they don't need to use anymore those barrels that were soaked with wine. Rather, they use the American wood and that oak that got soaked with the whiskey itself and never had wine, and therefore such a thing would make things much easier, so much that Rabelsky in his Sefer writes that when you take a look at the percentage, 12% only of barrels are being used of such sherry cask whiskey, and therefore all the rest, all the 88%, is something that never had the sherry wine, and therefore such a thing would be much easier to permit. Not only that, Rabelsky writes that most of the barrels are already old, 26 old, and therefore they use them 3 times within those 26 years, and it would be kosher according to the halacha that we explained before, that if you 3 times filled it up and you spill the water, that becomes mutar. And therefore, Rabelsky writes that because of that, it would be permitted, especially that the reason they put wine in there, says Rabelsky, that is only to kill the sharpness and not in order to give the flavor. So according to that, it would be much easier to permit to use that whiskey. Also, Rav Padua writes that 90% of whiskey that they use in Scotland is also that barrel that comes from America. How do they ship it from America to Scotland? The barrels are made out of a lot of pieces of wood put together from all sides that held together with metal strings. So whenever they're ready to ship it, after they used it one time, they take it apart, they ship it as pieces of wood in order to save space. Otherwise, you're sending barrels that takes on the ship a lot of room. And in order to use more room and to send more of those barrels, you take them apart, you ship them over there, they put them together, and this is how they use it. So that comes to be a great combination between the Americans and the Europeans that they send it. That is the reason that one could permit the whiskey. Now, says Rav Padua that is only true when we're dealing with regular whiskey. But today you have something new, and that is whiskey that they do in a special way that gives it the wine flavor. That definitely gives it the wine flavor. What do? After they mature the whiskey in those barrels, the American barrels that are clean of wine, since they wanted to get the flavor of the wine, they take it and they put it in other barrels for a short time that have the flavor of the wine, that they soak it in wine, and then they take the whiskey when it's matured already, when it's good, when it's been there for many, many years, and they take it and they put it into those barrels that have the flavor of wine, and that flavor of wine gives it the aroma that you have, and that is the reason you feel the taste, different kind, different flavors, whether it's the Burgundy, the Malaga, or whatever it is. That definitely davar that one cannot permit. And you'll see right away, as it says on the bottle itself, it says over there that it's called either special finish or it's called double matured, as we explained right now, how it's double matured or it's two wood. Whenever you see that it says that on the barrel, you know that they use that special maturing in two different woods in order to give it the taste of the wine, and therefore such a thing definitely should not be used. But if you're using regular whiskey, according to this understanding of the Minchat Yitzchak, of Rav Belsky, of Rav Padua that made a whole investigation into this, this would be permitted. Now, why did this become such a controversy? Because Rav Landau, Rav Moshe Yehuda Landau in Eretz Israel, one of the highest mashgichim with the highest ashgachot, came out and said that all whiskey is not permitted. And one of his rabbis over there, Rav Sofer, wrote a whole thing about it, why it should be asur. He came out with few conclusions. First of all, that whenever you have stam yeinam, which we explained right now, stam yeinam, that the halacha says is kuf lamed dalet seif bet, that if you have it mixed into other things, it would be asur. Now over there, he writes in his memoir that it would be asur bekol shu. That's how Rav Sofer writes. So therefore, over here, some flavor that goes inside your whiskey, it should be asur. Secondly, since it put there for that reason, for the taste, it put for flavor, the halacha is brought down that kol David letama afilu be'elef lo batil. Halacha in Shulchan Aruch that the Rama brings down in Tzadik Chet, Seif Chet. And therefore, obviously, since they put it for a flavor, it says, it would be not permitted. Thirdly, as you can see, the whiskey has that brown look. That is called chazuta. The Rama brings down in Kuf Yubet that whenever you have some look that was given by something that's forbidden, that's asur to have. One is not allowed to have that. For all three reasons, the Rav Landau came out saying that one is not permitted to drink whiskey today. Also, together with that, Harav Taharani, in a tshuva about whiskey, added another serious concern, and that is, he says that even if we can permit the barrels for all the reasons we said before, but you need to know that in the process of the fermentation, you put over there shmarim, yeast. That shmarim could be very likely that they come from grapes, and therefore that becomes davar ha'asur. Since that doesn't have supervision, rabbinical supervision, hashgacha, such a thing you're not allowed to have. And even if it's a safek in yain nesech, we hold that it's davar ha'asur. Safek yain nesech, although it's only the Rabbanan, Chacham Ovadia brings like this, a whole tshuva in Alichot Olam, for many sources, that safek in yain nesech, since yain nesech, although it's tam yenam, it's only the Rabbanan, we don't know that he poured it, but since it's so strict, therefore such a thing would be asur. So over here you have great reason to think and to assume that they might use such yeast or made out of yain nesech, made out of grapes, and therefore such a thing, he says, must have supervision. He even writes that it's very likely that some of the years, even if there would be a restriction of using those yeast from grapes in order to ferment the whiskey, but there are years that they uplift the Isur, the countries, they uplift it because they don't have anything else, so they allow it. And therefore, when it comes to your table 10, 20, 30 years after maturing, it was from those years. Not only that, the fines for using such things that could be many times cheaper than other ways to ferment it, using such yeast would be fines that would be ridiculous, and therefore they're not necessarily something that those that make the whiskey would be afraid of using. Thirdly, he says it's very easy over there to give them some shochad, and with that, they let it go with whatever's needed. So for all these reasons, it says, Rav Taharani, that in Divrei David, that one must make sure that it has supervision. And when we're talking about that psak that we said before of Rav Landau, we need to know that not everybody agrees with what he says for many reasons. For instance, it's what he said, first of all, with the fact that Stam Yenam would be batel, would not be batel, afilu be'elef, would not, if he gets mixed up in other things, he would not be batel, afilu be'elef. That's not what the halacha is, because if you take a look in Kuf Yudaled, in Shulchan Aruch, the Rema says that yain, such yain would be batel b'shishim. Since it's Stam Yenam, it would be batel b'shishim. But the Taz says even more than that, that since in Kuf Lamed Dalet, if hey, it says the wine in water, all you need is 6, not 60, 6. That would be permitted. So what's the difference? When is it that you need 60? When do you need 6? Says the Taz, and this is how most of the poskim hold, that wine needs to have 60, or maybe that you would say that it's eno batel afilu be'elef, as the Shulchan Aruch brings down, since it's min bemino in yain nesech would not be batel afilu be'elef. But when we're talking about the regular wine, when we're talking about whiskey, that's the same as water or any other liquid, it would be batel b'shesh. Within 6, that's sufficient. So according to that, you do have over here that kind of bitul, and therefore that thing should not be asur. Secondly, the fact that it says over here, he brought down Harav HaSofer, that it's avid letama, that the Rama brings down in Tzadik Chet, that whatever came in order to give a flavor would be asur. When you read the Rama, you see, and together with the Shach very, very clearly, you see that the only reason is because you can feel the flavor. So when you put something for flavor, as long as you can feel it, it's not going to be batel even more than 60. But once the flavor is not felt anymore, that would be mutar. That's pretty clear in the Rama, and the Shach says it very openly. So over here they're saying that if you try to feel the flavor of the wine inside the whiskey, you don't feel it. And therefore, such a thing would be mutar. Again, we're not talking right now about those that will double matured or the special made. All these things that are made in order to feel the flavor, those are different. But normal, regular whiskey, the flavor itself is not felt, and especially that if you hold that it's put there, the wine is put there only to destroy and to take away the sharpness. Therefore, such a thing would be permitted. So we're coming over here with a psak that says that since the whiskey is made in such barrels, and those barrels don't give the flavor, should be mutar. That sounds to be like a contradiction, or at least a very strong question on Rav Landau Shita, and how does he get out of that? So he answers this question in the following way. First of all, the Midchat Yitzchak himself says that the reason that the Shulchan Aruch says that once you put something there and you don't feel the flavor, it would be mutar, that's only when you had over here something that is very, very small and you didn't put it for that reason. But if the purpose you put it there was in order that you feel the flavor, that's a lashon of the Minchat Yitzchak. It says, "En ladun baze lakel mitam hamevuar besiman kuf lamed zayin sif dalet." That permitted, as we explained before. If we open up the halacha says over there, kuf lamed zayin, seif dalet. It says over there, kelim ha'asurim mechamat yain shel ovdei kochavim mutar liten letocham ben mayim ben shechar ben sh'ar mashkim. Which means, the halacha says, this is a Gemara, that if you put inside those barrels that had wine in it, shechar or mayim, that water and that shechar kills the taste of the wine. It destroys the taste. It becomes pagum and it's mutar completely. This is how the Shulchan Aruch brings down. This is how the Rambam says, halacha lemaaseh, that it's completely mutar because it takes away the flavor. This is the lashon of the Rambam in מאכלות אסורות. מותר ליתן לתוכם שחר או ציר או מורייס מיד, ואין צריך לכלום. You don't have to worry about anything. You can put over there the liquor, and it's completely מותר. מותר ליתן היין לתוכם, אחר שנותן הציר, that's completely מותר. In פירוש המשניות, in עבודה זרה פרק ב', the Rambam brings down, מותר ליתן בהם שחר לכתחילה. You're allowed to take those barrels and put in there לכתחילה that liquor. This is how the Shulchan Aruch writes in Kuf Lamed Zayin, as we just saw right now. כלים האסורים מחמת יין של עובדי כוכבים, מותר ליתן לתוכם. You're allowed to put it there. So, לכאורה over here, that's what it is, and therefore it should be completely mutar. So how do you answer this question? The Minchat Yitzchak says that you can permit from this Shulchan Aruch because over there it was not put in order, the wine was not put in those kelim in order to give flavor. אבל כיוון שהתכלית בנידון דידן לערב בכוונה כדי שהיין שחר ייבלע לתוכו מבליעת היין שבתוך החביות, therefore it's asur, whether it's for flavor or not for flavor, but you put it there purposely. And this is a rashba that the Shulchan Aruch is posek like, that whenever you put something on a regular basis, this is how it's done. Therefore, such a liquor should be asur. So says the Minchat Yitzchak that this halacha in Kuf Lamed Zayin in Shulchan Aruch would not permit us to use that whiskey, although it says openly in the Shulchan Aruch that the barrels that were used for wine, you're allowed lechatchila to put over there liquor or water, because that kills. That's the opinion of the Rosh. That kills the taste. Now, the truth is that this is the understanding of the Minchat Yitzchak. But there are few reasons in the poskim why it should be permitted over here, and the Minchat Yitzchak understood one way, but if you take a look in the Shulchan Aruch, that's a different reason. It says in the Rosh and the Tur that the reason you're allowed to put the liquor inside the barrel that had wine is because it makes the taste of the wine pagum, bad. And therefore, that's mutar. It's only when the taste of the wine is good that would be asur. But if it's pagum, it makes it bad, it would be mutar. The Rashba and the Meiri say a different reason. It's because the flavor is so, the bliot inside the barrels are so little and so few that that's not enough to be osir. And the third reason is the Ritva, that he says that the only Chazal only forbidden to put wine in such barrels, but not other things. The Gzerah was only to put wine inside barrels of wine, but not other things. Now, since the Minchat Yitzchak didn't learn that the halacha should be like the Rosh and the Tur, therefore he said that you can't permit because of that reason. But the Shulchan Aruch openly said that the halacha is of the Rosh, and this is how he was posek in the Bet Yosef in Kuf Lamed Zayin. And therefore the Rosh says that any kind of liquor would make the wine pagum. That's the reason one can permit such a thing. So it comes out that when you deal with the halacha itself, you have to know that there are poskim that would permit it and those that are not. What about the Minchat Yitzchak? The Minchat Yitzchak that seems to be matir, some poskim say that it's a misunderstanding in the Minchat Yitzchak, and really he never permitted the whiskey, the sherry cask whiskey. And this is how he writes, Rav Freund, he writes that the Minchat Yitzchak never said that it's mutar, and this is how he wrote in Tafshin Samech Vav. Rav Freund writes the following thing. This is the Gaivad of the Edah Haredit. He writes, Kol mashke whiskey וכדומה, any whiskey and alike, שידוע שכותבים על הוויסקי שעשו אותה בחבית של יין נסך, if they write on it, it's sherry cask, אפילו שהחביות יבשים וישנים, even if they used old barrels, או פגומים ונקיים לגמרי, even if they're completely clean, and even if it's פגום, אסורים לגמרי. It's completely אסור. And he writes that this was the opinion also of the Minchat Yitzchak. כפסק הלכה בשו"ת Minchat Yitzchak, and this is leisur. So this is how he writes, lemaise, in the opinion of the Minchat Yitzchak, that although it's completely considered like the Minchat Yitzchak was the matir, as Belsky writes, but Rav Freund learned that not like that. When you take a look at the Minchas Yitzchak, it seems like it's only a limud zchut, only in places that we know for sure that it doesn't give flavor. So Rav Landau says, but today this is what they honor themselves, they proud themselves, the whiskey companies, that it has over there flavor of wine. And whenever you'll call a whiskey company, any whiskey company that makes it in sherry cask barrels, they'll tell you that our whiskey is so meshubach, is so such quality because it has that flavor of this wine, of that wine, whatever they're using, and therefore that's how they proud themselves. So since we know that this is what they consider it, therefore we can rely on them and their professional people that taste the whiskey and they can feel the flavor of the wine, that this should be asur. So this was the opinion of Rav Landau. Again, many poskim said that it's mutar for all the reasons we said before, either because it doesn't give flavor, and even if it's put, the wine is not put there to give flavor, rather it's put there to kill the sharpness. And even if it's not, maybe that since you don't feel the flavor, it should be mutar. And thirdly, the halacha in Shulchan Aruch says that whenever you put shechar in it, you put liquor in it, it doesn't get, it's completely permitted because it kills the wine good flavor, and therefore that would be another reason to permit. Thirdly and fourthly, you have over here the fact that today they almost don't use such sherry cask barrels because most of them comes from America. As Rabelsky says, it's 88% that are completely clean of it, and therefore you have much reason to say that it's mutar. And on top of that, we're saying that they burn it, they burn that barrel, so it could be that's machshir the barrel, and so on and so forth. You have over here many reasons to permit, like for instance, the other reason that we're saying that even if they use from those 12% that they use for sherry cask, but since they use it over and over again within those years, and Abelsky writes each barrel is about 26 old, so therefore, if they used it within that time 3 times, although they age it for a very long time, for many years, but if they had a chance to age it for more than 3 times and change the liquor in it more than 3 times, the halacha permits such a thing because that's considered that it's a muhshar, and also that becomes dry and became old. So for all these reasons, you can permit. Those that hold it's not asur is for the reasons we explained before. So here we go, over here we have some understanding and some ideas what would be the dinim in sherry cask barrels. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll take on next week the halachot of when it's mutar and when it's asur, to have all kind of different questions in wine in the house, when you have the cleaning lady, when you buy such wine, when the goy touches it in restaurants, in weddings, and so on and so forth. But today we summarize that idea and that machloket, that controversy of sherry cask barrels whiskey.